how did you get started in musical composition and what made you want to pursue this type of work?
So I was born in Moscow, Russia. I haven't been there in like 10 years, but yeah, this is where my journey started. And honestly, I was, even though my parents are not musicians, I was surrounded by music, from early on because there's just, it's such a musical city, Moscow, where I'm from. So my journey started at Central Music School of Moscow Conservatory, which is a very like specialized academic kind of environment. But yeah, it's also very artistic. So I started my journey as a classical composer and classical piano player. And by the age of like 11, I already toured so many beautiful countries. And, this is kind of like how I got inspired to, write even more music in different styles, genres, and include different, cultures in my music. So that would be kind of like the beginning of it all.
So, what was your first job as a composer?
Yeah, so as a composer for film, my first job was the animated series Gingy. It's the LA series, like LA Russia collaborative project, and I think at some point it was on Prime. It was a very, very cool project because I got to see, this beautiful world of animation. At first, it started as kind of like an indie project, but then, the studio got so much bigger, and it's really beautiful work. Right now, I believe they are taking a little break, in terms of like the episodes, but I'm very excited for them to return for season 2 of that show.
And it's on Amazon Prime, Gingy?
Gingy animated series. Yeah, I'm not sure if they're still there. Again, like, there's been a lot of changes since like, like COVID and everything, but this has been like, such a nice thing. And in terms of the theater and stuff, when I lived in Europe, was doing a lot of work for the local theaters. And one of the highlights of that was a Crocus City Hall. It's a big stadium. I think I'm not sure if it's still, working, the way how they used to, but they used to have like those gigantic shows for like 7 to 10,000 people, where they would do like the holiday shows, and every day there would be like so many kids and so many adults coming and like seeing this kind of like holiday magic. And I was a composer for those shows, which was like a great experience.
Okay. And because I know I was reading your biography, how did you get your work featured in Cannes?
So actually that was this like again this Gingy animated series because they had like a huge festival run in terms of like sending their pilot and a couple of episodes, selected episodes from the series to different places, and one of them was Cannes Film Festival. And they happened to be in the like official selection, so it was shown to so many critics and amazing people, and my music was in it. So and this would be also my advice to people who are starting in this career. Like, this is the way to go about it. You want to get more projects, you want to get, successful in this field, you got to get your, music to be at those festivals, in the works of like young and not just young creators.
All right. And what made you because I was reading through,
Of course.
what made you want to create I know you have this company. What made you want to create the Excelsior Symphonic Orchestra?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I was born surrounded by music, but I had no musicians in my family, so a lot of opportunities I needed to create by myself, for myself. I know this is the way how, like, a lot of things in America work, where, like, you create your own dream and when you achieve it and stuff. But in terms of, again, like in Russia, there's a lot of thing about genetics, about, how your like different generations of musicians just like sharing more knowledge and more opportunities, but that wasn't really my case. So again, like creating opportunities by myself, I was thinking, hey, like I want my music to be played, I want to play with orchestra, and I want to just create great shows for my audience. So that's how I started, reaching out to different people, to different amazing musicians of different like ages and different backgrounds. And most of the Moscow Conservatory and other conservatories around the Europe. I was reaching out and saying, hey, like I'm doing this super cool passion project, and because I already had like connection with some people who were organizing tours and concerts, I was like, hey, well, there are a couple of upcoming concerts that I'm participating in, or I have this as a solo concert. How about we make this as a concert where we play different types of music? Doesn't necessarily mean it's just my music. We can do other things. And a lot of people were just saying yes. And it ended up being a great, passion project of mine and so many different people because, we could just, create our own music and everything on a spot. So, yeah.
That does sound very inspiring. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah,
Thank you.
because you look like a hustler. You look like a hard worker.
If something doesn't work for you, like let's call it like naturally, and when you just don't want to wait for things to happen for you, you just need to make them happen, and just, use your imagination.
So, what do you enjoy most about your work, and what do you enjoy the least?
Okay, so what I enjoy most is probably collaborating with different people because you just, you keep learning, you keep experiencing new things, and in general, just like all the, other cultures, all the other styles, different people just inspire your work and make your work more like 3D, if it was kind of a term in music. And also, I would say in terms of discovery, I think discovery of the new ways of creating music. This is one of the things I'm most interested in at the moment, right? Like we're talking about like different types of electronic music, different types of technology that we can use to create it. So, I would say like yeah, discovery and collaboration are my two main to goes, Um so regarding things that might be not as enjoyable, I would say sometimes timing is not the best, your best friend because sometimes you like bring the project in and you think, wow, this is a crazy good project and it's probably gonna attract so many people. And then you face the reality where, like, I don't know, we have COVID right now, so something else is just, interesting to people. They sit at home, they want to like look at more of the, media stuff, right? Instead of just like live performances and stuff. So that's why timing is super important, but sometimes it's annoying for some projects because you just can't wait to, make some things happen, but then you just have to, wait for a year or two and, plan and replan and make a lot of changes. That could be a little annoying and at times discouraging, but then you just discover new things and when things go even better. So yeah, that would be probably my answer to that.
And when it comes to music and just musical composition, who are your greatest inspirations?
So it actually constantly changing because I just I work in so many genres, and like if I work in movies, for example, right, it could be somebody who I'm getting assigned to listen to in order to create my music. So I would say at the moment, in terms of musical inspirations, it would be Ray, the performer, singer, songwriter. She is absolutely incredible. When I heard the composition, about the husband, it was honestly mind blowing how much one person can achieve. Other people would be probably. I would go with Daniel Ingram. He's a composer for actually most of the children's series in Hasbro and Cartoon Network. And sorry, I think there's a tree which fell. So yeah, so the Daniel Ingram from Cartoon Network and Hasbro, he wrote most of the songs like that I used to listen to when I was a kid. So he inspired me to, write my songs in the first place. And who else could it be? I think again, like there's just so many beautiful artists who are popping up right now. There's just so many, new genres. In terms of like the latest hits that I've heard was a hit. Look Who's Laughing Now. It's oh my God, by this guy. One second, let me just check his name so I pronounce it correctly. Yes, his name is Benjamin Ingrosso. He is from, I think, Universal Music Sweden, and honestly, an incredible guy, an incredible album that he released, and yeah, that was very inspirational to me. And the last one probably gonna be, I don't know, Hans Zimmer probably, because this guy just never ceases to, surprise me because there's just so many different, again, sounds and so many different, orchestration and types of music that this guy does that, is just so inspirational in any, way. He actually just had a collaboration with Ray where it was her song, and he orchestrated it and like brought it, to life in a completely different way that it was written before, as I read on her interview. So that collaboration was one of the best, latest hits that I heard.
One composer that I know is very underrated. I don't know if you've heard of him. James Newton Howard. That
Oh, well, I wouldn't call him underrated, but yeah, no, I get the joke. He's incredible, honestly. I know he worked with Simmer a lot, and like honestly, one of my favorite music of his is a Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them soundtrack. It's been on repeat for years. So yeah, I know who that is. He's great.
yeah, one my favorite soundtrack of his was from Dinosaur from
Oh,
2000.
really? No, it's
Dinosaur.
it's
Because
yeah.
what I noticed when because I listened to I've watched the movie Dinosaur, but I've also seen Maleficent. That's what he also did the score for that. For whatever reason, his score sounds almost otherworldly, like ethereal. Like he has these wind instruments that ascend and descend in scale.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
no,
really
that's
cool.
true. That makes total sense. And honestly, I love composers who can do a lot of different things because you can hear the elements from, different works they do and different projects they work on in their like, future upcoming pieces. It's always just like a mix of beautiful sounds and layers and everything. So, yeah.
So, what do you hope your career will be in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, currently we just wrapped up an off-Broadway premiere of the original musical Wayne's Gun that I wrote for theater. It's like a pretty multimedia work, and currently we're in conversation with some major studios about bringing it as an animated series in the near future. So, like in 5 to 10 years, I'm really hoping, outside of just like, writing music for more projects, is to be producing, I don't know, season 2 or 3 of that series. If it happens to be, like, I don't know, on Disney or DreamWorks, that is a dream, but, we're in conversations and I'm talking to some amazing people about it. So, yeah.
And one last thing, any advice for young composers?
Ooh, okay. So I think there's a lot to think about when it comes to, again, different generations and like, and it's very hard to give an exact advice because things might change in the future of how the industry works. So my thing would be like my advice would be adaptable, right? Because times change, genres change, cinema, like media, it all evolves into different like shapes and forms. So be open to that change, right? Like it doesn't matter what your beliefs are, right? You can keep them and you can evolve, right? But be open to hear other people's perspective on your work because sometimes somebody could see more potential of you than you can, right, at the moment. So I would say, yeah, flexibility, adaptability are everything in this industry. So yeah.